Well, welcome, Mayor Bowser.
Thank
you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's great to see everybody in person. Welcome to Washington.
Exactly. I want to remind the audience there will be a time for Q&A within our discussion. So we have a lot to talk about, so I'll dive right in.
Okay.
So on March 11, 2020, DC declared a public health emergency on the same day as the World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic. Mm-hmm. We're here 18 plus months later. Can you share some insight on how you led the nation's capital during unprecedented times? I'm sure you can give a seminar on it, but if you can.
I could,
yeah.
Actually, and I think in time we'll all look back on this time and know that it was a period of unprecedented challenge in cities and towns to the whole world. For us, it was COVID. It was also dealing with a political situation in our city, and in particular a president in our city that had become antagonistic to the city in some ways, and it was dealing with the financial crisis that COVID caused. So you asked about a particular day. Nowhere in the mayor's handbook does it say, this is how you shut down the city, send everybody home, and close the schools. And having to make that decision was probably among the most difficult I've ever made. But even more difficult is making sure that we have a strategy for the comeback.
That's right. Now, in your strategy for the comeback, because DC is open, right?
DC is open.
It's open.
Thank
We're
you.
here, it's open. In
you.
regard to like economic opportunity, how are you going to ensure that everyone gets a fair shot?
Well, that's certainly what we have been focused on throughout my tenure. I'm honored that I am finishing my 7th year as mayor of my hometown. There hadn't been a mayor reelected to a second term in 16 years in DC. And so having the tenure that we have, and the great team of leaders that I have in place, we have been able to make incredible investments in the district and spread that fair shot around. We've been focused on affordable housing as a tenet of that. We are a city where people want to be. Businesses want to open. And so that has put a lot of pressure on housing costs. I pledged when I first became mayor that we would spend $100 million in our affordable housing fund every year. And this year I was able to quadruple that. So this year we will have invested $1 billion in affordable housing in Washington, D.C. So that's incredible. And with the incredible infusion of dollars, federal dollars that have come into cities and towns all over the district, we all do have that focus on how do we make it more equitable? How do we start more women-owned businesses? How do we train more DC residents for good-paying DC jobs that will allow people to stay and thrive here? How do we reinvest in our downtown and reimagine our downtowns in the years to come? And how do we focus on the future of work? Right. I think that's a challenge for employers. I know you have a lot of employers in the room, but we're an employer too. 37,000 people work for the government, and how we reshape work and make sure that we continue to attract the best of the best is the challenge for leaders ahead.
In regard to return to work, we know that working moms were disproportionately affected by the pandemic in terms of having to leave the job to take care of children. How are you addressing that in regards to return to work? Are you creating, more flexibility for working moms? Because you're a working mom yourself.
I'm a working mom myself.
Yes, you are.
And I'm a working mom who I would not have been able to do my job, to go in person, to fight a global pandemic with all the anxieties that everybody else had, without great support from my village, great support at home. And I have flexibility, and I'm able to see how my employees were impacted by that. And we are local government. We provide local government services. And so a lot of our work is by nature is in-person work. And so my commitment from the early stages was to make sure our buildings were in good shape, that we had a testing infrastructure that was second to none, that we had a vaccine program that reached every part of our city and our workforce, to make sure that when people came back to their offices that they were in good shape. But also to think about the flexibility of our approach, of our HR approach, and that's what we're doing now. We actually reopened the government in July 11th, and our workforce is back 3 days a week. They have telework opportunities up to 2 days a week. And that's the posture that we're in right now, but I know that the next phase is post-pandemic. We're still in the relief stage, recovery and relief stage. So post-pandemic, how are we going to shape permanent policies and take the lessons that we learned from COVID? Everything that we learned from COVID wasn't bad.
Right.
We figured out some efficiencies. We figured out better ways, more effective ways to work with our residents, and those things that we want to keep.
All right. I wanted to talk about another significant occurrence during this past 18 months was the January 6th insurrection. Mm-hmm. You're leading in the nation's capital. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine how surreal that must have been, but could you give us some insight on that day and how you approached it as the leader of the city?
Absolutely. I think certainly, I think a lot of things happened in D.C. over the last year that demonstrated to people how unique D.C. is in the American political system. Not exactly a city, not exactly a state. And people really focused in on why we are continuing to advance our cause of statehood. Because with statehood, it's the only way that we'll have full autonomy. You won't have American troops moving on D.C. streets. And that's the only way that we get representation. Still, too few Americans know that we are right here in Washington, D.C., and we don't have anybody speaking for us in the Senate. We don't have 2 senators. Our congresswoman doesn't have the vote. Yet we pay the same taxes that every American has, and we have all the responsibilities of citizenship, but we don't have basic rights. We don't have a vote when there are important votes about this legislation, about what we're going to do with infrastructure, what we're going to do with human infrastructure. We don't have a single vote, yet we pay into that system. What the January 6th insurrection also showed is that the federal government controls its lands, especially the Congress and the White House and other parts of the system. It demonstrated that the D.C. National Guard is actually the president's National Guard, that we don't have control of our own National Guard. And I can assure you, if we did, the D.C. Guard would have been able to assist the members of the Congress much sooner than they were able to on January 6th.
This time I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience.
Welcome, and thank you for hosting us.
My pleasure.
In your city. It's
Thank you.
really wonderful to be back in D.C.
Thank you.
You're one of the few mayors in the country, I think, that really has control over school districts.
Yes.
And I wanted to know how the children of D.C. are doing, and I was very engaged all the way back when Michelle Rhee was here,
Yep.
and Mayor Fente, and knowing there were lots of changes and lots of progress was being made, and I just wondered if you could update us on how your children are doing.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for asking about the children, and I think that the children are doing much better than when our schools were closed. And we, at the beginning of this school year, were completely in person, 5 days a week for all of our children have the opportunity to be in in-person school. And we've worked with our teachers, we've worked with our staff and parents to make sure we could get back. I am one of the few mayors who has accountability for the schools with the Council of the District of Columbia. And I have to tell you, it's the single biggest thing, along with our focus on public safety, that contributed to the renaissance of our city. We have been able to attract families, retain families, grow across all 8 wards of the district because we have and we invest in our schools. Our taxpayers are steadfast in their commitment. I'll give you an example. We built a $100 million academic high school in the center of the city just this past year because people want to know that we're investing at every level. You mentioned my little girl who's 3 years old in free pre-K. And when we look around the region and we listen to the discussion about pre-K around the country, we've been offering free pre-K, I think 6 or 7 years already in the district, which we know now we're seeing the benefits pay off as our children matriculate. So I feel very confident about the decisions that we made to make investment in schools our top priority. Our taxpayers have stuck with us, and our children are on the right track. Now, there's work to be done, for sure. We know that in the middle grades and high school, there continues to be a lot of work to be done. Our focus in the next couple of years is really on how we're transforming the 12th grade year in high school. Talking about lessons learned in COVID, we see that some of our older students, our 12th graders, were working, doing independent study, and different things that will prepare them for college and career. So we continue to be one of the fastest improving urban school districts in the country, and we have the political will behind maintaining that progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to get some final thoughts from you on leadership. What leadership advice do you have for us going forward?
Well, first, I want to say it has been a difficult year for female workers and leaders, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs. And we know that women will lead in that regard as well. There are a lot of people have spent COVID thinking about how they want to spend their time and their professional energy. And I think a lot of people are going to start businesses. DC is that type of place. People have noted how well women are doing in tech and starting in tech and attracting investment in DC. We have one of the highest qualified and educated workforces anywhere. So my thought on leadership is that bet on cities because people are still moving there, and that's where talent is, and that's where you can grow your businesses. And there's no better place than Washington.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.